White neighbor called cops on a black CEO's wedding, then froze when the groom flashed his sheriff's badge. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the story. Arrest them all. The screams sliced through the summer air like glass shattering in sunlight. Every head turned. The string quartet froze mid-note. And right there, between rows of white chairs and rose petals, a woman in a navy blouse pointed straight at the bride. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The groom's jaw tightened. The bride, Alicia Brooks, barely breathed before his hand found hers steady warm. "Calm down, baby. Trust me." Her fingers trembled around the bouquet. "Marcus, what's happening?" He didn't answer. Not yet, because he already knew. Beyond the floral arch, two black SUVs rolled onto the grass. 4 officers stepped out, vests marked FBI weapons at their sides. Behind them, the neighbor Karen Whitmore looked triumphant, her phone still pressed to her ear. "This isn't legal," she shouted. "They don't live here. They're trespassing," the bride's mother gasped. Guests murmured. Someone whispered, "That's their house." But the lie had already taken root. Marcus's voice dropped low and even. "Stay with me." He turned slightly, shielding Alicia. The officers advanced, heavy boots, sinking into the same lawn that had held laughter seconds ago. The lead agent raised his voice. "Sir, we've had a report of an unauthorized gathering on private property. Step aside." Marcus exhaled slowly like a man who'd seen this storm before. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. We're glad you're here. Now back to Marcus. The camera pans across chaos, guests, frozen children clinging to parents, phones rising to record. Karen shouted again, voice sharp with certainty. "You people think you can buy your way in anywhere." Her words landed heavy. "Poisonous." Marcus said nothing, just looked at her, calm, unreadable. Because this wasn't the first time someone mistook his presence for a problem. But it would be the last time anyone tried to erase his belonging on his own land. The badge inside his jacket pressed lightly against his chest, silent, patient waiting. 2 hours earlier, the same backyard looked like a painting, light gold sunlight, laughter spilling between white tents and linen tables. Music drifted through the air, soft jazz and champagne bubbles mixing with the smell of garden roses. Marcus Brooks stood under the oak tree in a crisp beige suit, fixing his cufflinks while his best man teased. "You sure about forever?" Sheriff Marcus smiled. "Forever's the easy part. It's the world that makes it hard." They laughed, not knowing how true that would soon become. The guests were a mosaic of community, family, colleagues, old friends from the sheriff's department and his company Brooks Security. The chatter was warm, easy. No one saw the eyes watching from across the fence. From her porch next door, Karen Whitmore sipped iced tea with tight lips, muttering under her breath. "Noise ordinances? Ridiculous," she said. She zoomed in her phone, camera, faces, decorations, the elegant black couple she didn't recognize. They can't afford that house. Not them. The prejudice hid behind a tone of civic concern, but it was still prejudice. Inside, Alicia Brooks adjusted her veil before the mirror. Her mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "You look like every prayer I ever said," she whispered. Alicia smiled softly. "Then today God answered you twice." Outside, Marcus glanced toward the driveway. 2 SUVs, one black, one silver, parked neatly near the gate. His security detail had insisted. He told them to stand down. "No guards today," he said earlier. "No uniforms, no tension, just love." He wanted this wedding to be peace, visible proof that success didn't need armor. But peace in certain zip codes was never fully allowed. A little boy ran past, waving a ribbon wand, his laughter echoing through the garden. Marcus knelt to tie the child's shoelace. "Careful, champ. Don't trip before the cake." In that simple moment, everything felt right. Then across the fence, Karen lowered her phone and made the call. "Hello, police. There's a large crowd at 432 Willow Creek Drive. Looks suspicious, possibly trespassing." She watched the sunlight reflect off her screen like justice itself. But it wasn't justice, it was jealousy disguised as law. Minutes later, sirens whispered from a distance. No one heard them yet. The bride's veil caught the wind. Marcus looked up, smiling, unaware that peace had just started its countdown. The call lasted 42 seconds, just enough for a misunderstanding to become a weapon. Suspicious activity, multiple vehicles, loud gathering, Karen said, pacing her porch like a patriot on duty. Dispatch asked for clarification. She gave it confidently. It looks like some kind of illegal event. They don't belong here. By the time she hung up, the afternoon sun had softened into amber. The wedding march had begun. Alicia walked down the aisle, her father at her side, tears pooling in his eyes. Guests rose a sea of smiles. And under the arch of white roses, Marcus waited, hands folded, heart steady. The minister's voice carried through the breeze. Today we celebrate love, unity, and promise. His words floated like light, but somewhere beyond the fence, 2 patrol cars idled at the curb. Officer Reed, 28, checked the call log. Suspicious gathering. Possible trespass. His partner Lopez frowned. At a wedding, guess someone didn't like the guest list. They both chuckled, but duty was duty. The report had been logged, and their supervisor was already on the way. Inside the garden, nothing broke the illusion yet. The choir sang, cameras flashed, a child's laughter drifted through the air. Even Karen hesitated for a moment, watching how beautifully they moved, how every detail gleamed with intention. Her face softened just briefly. Then pride snapped it back. "They'll thank me later," she muttered. "If it's stolen property, they'll thank me." She took another picture of the crowd, of the cars, of Marcus's badge glinting faintly at his side when the breeze caught his jacket. But she didn't notice the badge, only the color of the man wearing it. Alicia's vows began. "You taught me that silence can be strength, that love doesn't raise its voice, it stands its ground." Marcus smiled. The crowd melted in awe. Behind the fence, Karen lowered her phone again. "Enough," she whispered. "I'm calling back." Back in dispatch, a second call logged in, same voice, same tone of certainty. This time, her words carried weight. "There's armed security in the backyard," she said. "I think something dangerous is happening." That single sentence shifted the whole response. 3 additional units rolled out. A helicopter request went up for precautionary surveillance. And while Alicia and Marcus sealed their vows with a kiss, a convoy of lights flickered 3 streets away. The sirens hadn't begun yet, but the storm had found its route. The first sign was a ripple in the air, an unease too subtle for most to name. Marcus felt it before he saw it, the way an animal senses thunder before it strikes. A sudden hush fell between songs. The birds stopped singing. Even the wind held its breath. From the gate, 2 patrol cars crept forward, lights spinning but sirens off. Marcus's best man, Aaron, leaned in. "You expecting anyone?" Marcus shook his head slowly. "Not the kind that comes uninvited." Guests turned confused but polite, as if courtesy could make the uniforms disappear. The minister paused mid-sentence. "Is everything all right?" Marcus took one look at Alicia, her eyes wide, 1,000 questions behind them, and smiled softly. "Calm down, baby. Trust me." She nodded, but her fingers gripped his sleeve. "Marcus, they're coming closer." He glanced at the patrol cars, assessing angles, movements, tone. Old instincts stirred the years of training that never left him. But this wasn't a case. This was his wedding. The lead officer stepped out, hand on his holster. "Sir, can I see some identification?" Marcus tilted his head. At my own ceremony, the officer hesitated, eyes flicking toward Karen, who was still standing on her porch like a director calling shots. "She's the one who called Lopez," murmured to Reed. "Claims trespassing and possible armed individuals." Reed frowned. "Armed. They're holding champagne glasses." Karen shouted from the fence, "That's him. He's the one in charge." Every guest turned toward her. Someone whispered. She called the cops. For a wedding, phones began to rise. Screens started recording. Marcus's calm was surgical. He raised a hand to quiet the murmurs. "Nobody move. Nobody shout. Let them do their job." His voice carried authority, not volume, but weight. The officers looked at each other, uncertain. Something about the man didn't fit the role of suspect. So Reed began again. "We've had multiple reports of," Marcus interrupted gently, eyes steady. "Of what? Love in public." A few guests chuckled nervously, the tension cracking for a heartbeat. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "I'll speak with your commanding officer." Reed nodded toward the gate. "He's on his way." Marcus's tone never rose, but something in it shifted steel beneath silk. "Then tell him Marcus Brooks is waiting." Reed blinked. The sheriff, Marcus, didn't answer. He just met his gaze, calm and unflinching. The guests watched, unsure whether to clap or pray. Karen's expression faltered for the first time, and as the last note of the wedding song faded into the wind, the groom, who refused to flinch, simply stood there between love and law, peace and prejudice, holding both worlds still with nothing but composure. The garden had gone silent, so still it felt staged. Only the faint hum of the patrol cars filled the air, blue lights spinning slow circles across white tablecloths. Children stopped mid-laugh. The band lowered their instruments. The sound of confusion settled like dust. Alicia's maid of honor whispered, "Are they arresting someone?" Another guest, an older man in a navy suit, shook his head. "No one's done anything. But uncertainty travels faster than truth." Near the back row, a teenage cousin pulled out his phone. "They can't do this," he murmured. The screen's red light blinked alive. Across from him, an elderly aunt pressed her palm over her heart. "Lord, protect them," she whispered. Marcus stayed, centered his stance, solid expression unreadable. To the officers, it looked like defiance. To his guests, it looked like something they'd never forget. Karen leaned over the fence, voice sharp and self-righteous. "Finally, someone's enforcing the rules around here." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman near the aisle turned and shouted, "Rules for what? For being married." Karen flinched, then barked back. "You people don't understand property laws." The phrase hit like a slap. "You people." Even the officers froze for half a beat. Marcus's eyes lifted, not angry, not startled, just steady. He'd heard that phrase too many times to be surprised anymore. The best man, Aaron, stepped closer. "Marcus, you want me to—" Marcus raised one hand. No. He wasn't going to let chaos write his story. Not today. The lead officer tried again, his voice less certain now. "Sir, we need to verify who owns this property." A murmur swept through the guests, low, rising disbelief turning to anger. Someone near the back shouted, "It's his house." Another voice joined, "Check the deed." Phones were up now, capturing everything. The bride's trembling hands, the groom's calm silence, the neighbor's smirk framed by roses. Marcus turned slightly to the crowd, his voice carrying through the still air. "Everyone, please, let them finish. Truth doesn't need noise." The words dropped like anchors, steadying the room. Alicia wiped a tear from her cheek. "They're humiliating us," she whispered. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "They're revealing themselves. That's different." Across the yard, the teenage cousin whispered to his phone camera, "This man's the calmest person I've ever seen." And they still treat him like a threat. The clip would go viral in less than an hour. But for now, the only thing that mattered was the silence, the kind that came before justice learned how to speak. The silence didn't last. It cracked like thin glass. Officer Reed cleared his throat, stepping forward again. "Sir, this is a private investigation. Please remain where you are." Marcus stood perfectly still. "I am." Reed hesitated, glancing at Lopez. The neighbor's voice sliced through the pause. "That's him, the organizer. He's pretending to live here." The crowd stirred disbelief, thick as humidity. A man from the second row called out. "You're out of line," Lady Karen snapped back. "You don't know who these people are." A wedding guest near the catering table muttered, "Oh, we know exactly who they are, and who you are too." Someone else added, "Try minding your own yard for once." But Karen wasn't listening. She jabbed her finger toward Marcus. "He's dangerous. He's hiding something." Alicia's breath caught. "Marcus." He turned his head slightly. "Don't." Reed raised both hands. "Everyone, please let's stay calm." Karen barked. "Do your job. Look at him. Does that look like a homeowner to you?" That sentence, sharp and soaked in venom, hit harder than any shove. Alicia stepped forward, trembling but fierce. "That is my husband. This is our home." Karen scoffed, folding her arms. "Sure it is." Laughter, ugly and nervous, rose from across the fence where a few of Karen's friends had gathered. The crowd turned horrified. And in that instant, the dignity of the wedding fractured. Guests shifted, unsure whether to defend or stay silent. Marcus didn't move. He just breathed slow and measured the way men do when they've had to master restraint to survive. He looked at Reed and Lopez. "You came because someone made a call. So check your facts. Start with the property record." Reed nodded, slightly embarrassed. "We're verifying that now." Karen interrupted, voice shrill. "Don't waste time. Arrest him before he runs." That was when the bride's mother stepped in, her voice breaking but firm. "Runs from what?" From his own wedding, the crowd erupted, not violent, but loud enough to shake the lie. Guests shouted over one another. "He's the groom. This is insane. Let them finish their vows." The lead officer raised his radio, calling for backup to manage the crowd. The word hung heavy. Manage. As if the guests, doctors, teachers, veterans were a threat. Alicia's tears shimmered in the sunlight. "They're treating us like criminals." Marcus met her eyes, calm as steel. "Because they can't handle peace with power." Phones caught everything now, the shouts, the fear, the woman over the fence smiling like she'd won something. But Marcus didn't flinch. He stood tall among roses and flashing lights, the symbol of a man accused for existing where he belonged. And behind that silence, something colder began to build, justice waiting for its cue. The tension finally broke when one officer reached for his cuffs. "Sir, we need to detain you for questioning." The words dropped like stones into water. Alicia's veil fluttered as she stepped forward, eyes wide. "Detain him for what?" No one answered. The officer took another step. His partner looked unsure, eyes darting toward Karen, who nodded eagerly from her porch like a puppet master. "Don't resist, sir," the officer warned. Marcus didn't move. "I haven't, and I won't." His voice was quiet, but it carried more command than the badge on their chests. Then came the sound that cut every laugh, every whisper, the metallic click of handcuffs unlocking. The crowd gasped. A bridesmaid shouted, "This is madness!" A child began to cry. The lead officer hesitated, his hand hovering near Marcus's wrist. "We can do this easy, or... What Marcus's voice was calm, almost curious. "You'll arrest a man for getting married on his own property," the officer blinked, thrown off by the certainty in his tone. Karen yelled from the fence, "He's lying. People like him don't own houses like this." That sentence was the spark. The guests reacted at once. Phones rose higher. A man in the third row shouted, "You're humiliating him." Another voice followed, "We're recording everything." Still, the officer reached out. His hand touched Marcus's arm lightly, but enough. Alicia gasped. "Don't you touch him." She stepped in front of her husband, her gown brushing against the officer's uniform. For a heartbeat, the scene froze, love, law, and prejudice suspended in the same breath. Reed looked over his shoulder, uneasy. "Dispatch, we may have a situation." But before he finished, Marcus spoke again, softer this time. "You have no idea how wrong this is." His tone wasn't a threat. It was a prophecy. He turned his head slightly toward the nearest guest. "Someone call Chief Daniels. Tell him Marcus Brooks is being detained at his own wedding." Reed froze mid-step. "Wait, Marcus Brooks." The name rippled through the crowd like thunder rolling across calm water. Someone whispered. The sheriff. Karen blinked, confused. "What did he say?" Marcus's expression didn't change. "You wanted to see identification," he said quietly. "You're about to get it." The officer's hand dropped from his arm. The other guests fell into a hush so deep it almost sounded like prayer. Karen's voice cracked the silence again, shrill, uncertain. "He's bluffing. Don't let him trick you." But deep down, everyone could feel it. The shift. The moment when a man stops defending himself and starts reclaiming the truth. And though no one knew it yet, this was the last second before the entire story flipped. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The way he stood, the quiet precision of his movements, shifted the entire rhythm of the moment. He reached into his inner jacket pocket, slow, deliberate, every gesture visible. "Easy," Officer Reed said instinctively, placing a hand on his holster. Marcus nodded. "Exactly. Easy." He pulled out a small black wallet. Not leather for fashion, leather for duty. The gold edge of a badge flashed in the sunlight, but he didn't open it yet. He just held it there between them, calm and certain. "Before you go any further, Marcus said you should know who you're talking to." Karen barked from behind the fence. "Oh, save it. Anyone can fake a badge." Marcus didn't look at her. His gaze stayed locked on the lead officer. "Run the name Brooks through dispatch. First name Marcus. Tell them it's code 7-2. Reed frowned but obeyed, pressing the radio to his shoulder. "Dispatch, verify identity. Marcus Brooks possible code 7-2. The response came faster than anyone expected. "Confirm." The radio crackled. "Marcus Brooks, current sheriff, East Ridge County. Repeat, Sheriff Brooks. Proceed with full respect and caution." The sound rippled through the yard. Guests gasped. Karen's smug grin evaporated, leaving only the sound of her own heartbeat in her ears. Reed froze. "Sir, I." Marcus raised one hand, silencing him with grace. "No harm done. Yet." He looked around, his eyes sweeping across the garden, the guests, the officers, the trembling bride beside him. This is what happens when fear answers faster than facts. No one dared to move. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting for permission to breathe again. Marcus took Alicia's hand, gently grounding her. "You see, baby," he said softly, "they don't look twice before they judge once." Tears shimmered in her eyes, not from fear but from recognition. He turned back to the officers. "Now, which one of you's in charge here?" Lopez stammered. We thought. I know what you thought." His voice was still even, but every syllable carried authority. "You were following a call. That call came from her." He nodded toward Karen. She froze, color draining from her face. I was just trying to keep the neighborhood safe. Marcus's tone didn't change. You did the opposite. Guests began to murmur, phones trembling in their hands, capturing the moment the story reversed itself. Marcus looked directly at Reed. Tell your chief to call me in 5 minutes. We're going to talk about policy and accountability. Reed swallowed hard. Yes, Sheriff. And for the first time since the sirens arrived, the authority in that backyard had shifted back to where it belonged. Quietly. Completely. Irrevocably. The badge gleamed once, then twice, as if the sunlight itself wanted proof. Marcus flipped it open with slow precision. No theatrics, just truth displayed in gold and steel. The engraving caught every eye. Sheriff Marcus Brooks, East Ridge County. Gasps spread through the crowd like wind through tall grass. One of the officers took a step back, his face paling. Sir, we had no idea. Marcus met his gaze evenly. You didn't ask. Karen stumbled a step behind her fence. That's impossible. You can't be. Marcus turned toward her, calm as judgment. Can't be what Miss Whitmore the law. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The guests erupted. Some applauded, some shouted. That's right, the same people who had filmed in silence were now holding their phones, higher eyes wide with awe. Children pointed toward the badge. Older relatives wiped tears from their cheeks. For the first time that day, the shame didn't belong to Marcus. He walked closer to the patrol cars, every step measured. I've served this county for 15 years, he said, voice clear and steady. Protected families like hers, neighborhoods like this one. He looked toward Karen not with rage but with something heavier, disappointment. And yet the moment I took off my uniform to be a husband instead of an officer, I became a suspect again. The words landed harder than any order. Even the officers lowered their heads. Reed finally said, We owe you an apology, Sheriff. Marcus shook his head. You owe yourselves a lesson. He turned facing the crowd now, his tone almost reflective. This, he gestured toward the chaos, the flashing lights, the scattered petals on the grass, is what happens when assumption outranks evidence. When prejudice wears the same face as concern. The cameras caught everything, the authority, the calm, the restraint that somehow felt louder than shouting. Alicia stepped up beside him, tears glinting under her veil. You didn't even have to raise your voice, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Power doesn't always need volume, just presence. Karen's voice broke through the hush, trembling now. I didn't mean any harm. Marcus turned slowly, his badge still shining in the Sunday. Intent doesn't erase impact, ma'am, and justice doesn't pause for comfort. The officers stood at attention, their radios silent, waiting for instruction. Marcus slipped the badge back into his jacket, the motion final, deliberate. Stand down, he ordered quietly. This wedding will continue without interruption. Reed nodded immediately. Yes, Sheriff. And just like that, the hierarchy of the day reversed itself completely, from accusation to accountability, from humiliation to honor, all because one man refused to shout louder than the truth. For a moment, no one breathed. It was as if time itself stalled, caught between disbelief and awakening. The air felt different now, heavier with awareness, lighter with truth. Karen Whitmore stood frozen behind her fence phone, still in her hand, her fingers trembling. The woman who had shouted orders now looked small against the sunlight, her voice gone, her certainty cracked. She tried to laugh it off weakly, awkwardly. I just thought there were intruders. Marcus turned toward her, his presence measured, not menacing. You didn't think, he said quietly. You assumed. He took a few steps closer, stopping just before the fence line. And when people like you assume, people like me end up in handcuffs or worse. Her throat tightened. She tried to respond, but the words came out as air. Behind her, one of her friends whispered Karen stop talking. The crowd was silent except for the faint click of cameras recording every second. Every eye in that garden had seen the shift the moment prejudice met accountability. Officer Reed lowered his cap. Sheriff Brooks again, where Marcus raised a hand. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to her. He gestured toward Alicia, who stood tall beside the floral arch, the veil trembling in the wind. Reed turned, shame clear in his eyes. Ma'am, I'm sorry. Alicia nodded, once her voice steady. You should be. Then quieter. You didn't see us. You just saw a story someone else wrote. A murmur rippled through the guests' agreement, anger awakening all at once. One elderly woman near the aisle whispered to her grandson, That's how change starts, baby. Right there. Karen took a shaky step backward. I didn't mean for all this. Marcus's gaze softened, but his tone stayed firm. You never do. That's why it keeps happening. Phones captured her face, her regret, her silence. The internet would later freeze this very frame, the sheriff and the woman who called the cops on his wedding both standing still, both caught between two Americas. Then one guest broke the tension with a slow clap. Another followed. Then 10. Within seconds, the garden was echoing with applause, not for spectacle but for clarity. Even the officers joined, hesitant but honest, acknowledging the truth they'd just seen. Alicia exhaled, her tears finally falling. Marcus reached for her hand, his voice low. "Let them clap. It's not for me, it's for what we survived." Karen sank onto her porch chair, her phone slipping from her hand. The recording kept going, but the voice behind it had nothing left to say. The world around her was awake now, and for the first time she realized the sound of silence wasn't peace, it was consequence. The applause faded, replaced by a hum of whispers, low, reverent, electrified. Marcus stood still for a long moment, letting the sound wash over him like rain after a drought. Then calmly he turned to Officer Reed. "File a report for false emergency call section 148.5. Reed blinked. Sir Marcus didn't raise his voice. "You heard me. False police report. It's not optional." Reed nodded, his tone changing from defensive to dutiful. "Yes, Sheriff." Karen's head snapped up. "Wait, what? You're charging me?" Marcus's eyes met hers. "You charged yourself when you lied." Her lips trembled. "It was a mistake." He shook his head slowly. "No. A mistake is when you drop a glass. This was intent." Each word landed like a gavel. One of the officers stepped forward with a clipboard, quietly taking her statement. Karen's face went pale. "You can't do this to me. I was protecting the neighborhood." Marcus's reply was cold truth. "You were protecting an illusion and attacking what didn't fit it." The crowd murmured again, half pity, half satisfaction. A child tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mommy, is she going to jail?" The mother knelt, whispering, "Maybe. But more important, she's going to learn." Marcus turned to the officers, his tone softening slightly. "Escort her inside. No handcuffs, just accountability." Even that small act of mercy felt like order being restored. Karen's knees shook as she walked toward her door, every camera lens following her retreat. She reached the steps and whispered, "I'm sorry." Marcus nodded once. "Then prove it. Change how you see the next one." Reed exhaled, the tension finally breaking. "Sheriff, we'll make this right." Marcus answered quietly, "Then start by never letting it happen again." He turned back toward the guests. The music had stopped long ago, but a new rhythm hung in the air, the rhythm of dignity returning. Alicia's mother wiped her eyes. "You handled it without even shouting." Marcus smiled faintly. "Justice doesn't need noise, just truth in motion." From the back, the minister's voice broke the quiet. "Shall we continue?" The crowd laughed softly, relief and respect in equal measure. Marcus looked at his bride, her makeup smudged but her eyes fierce. He took her hand again. "Where were we?" Alicia smiled through tears. "Right where we were meant to be." As the officers finished their notes, the badge on Marcus's chest caught the last light of day, steady, unwavering. For everyone watching, that glow wasn't just authority. It was redemption, real, earned, and unmistakably black. The sun was dipping low now, painting everything gold, the roses, the faces, even the broken silence. The officers had left quietly. The fence stood still. The crowd, once shaken, now felt anchored again. Marcus stood before the altar once more, his hand still holding Alicia's. No microphone, no speeches, just a man reclaiming a moment meant for love. The minister's voice trembled slightly, but he continued. "Where there is truth, there is peace. And where there is love, there is power." A faint breeze brushed the petals across the aisle, scattering them like proof that something sacred had survived the chaos. Alicia looked up at her husband, eyes bright with tears and pride. "They tried to turn our love into a crime," she whispered. Marcus smiled. "But love is the highest law." The guests applauded softly, not for the wedding itself, but for what it had become. A sermon, a statement, a mirror. Even those who'd filmed the whole thing lowered their phones, realizing the moment was bigger than any post. Karen's porch was empty now, the door closed tight. But somewhere inside, a woman sat alone, replaying her words and seeing for the first time what they really meant. The minister cleared his throat. "Do you, Marcus Brooks, take Alicia Carter?" "I do," Marcus said, steady, certain. "And do you, Alicia Carter, take Marcus Brooks?" "I always have." The rings slid into place, shining under a sun that refused to quit. When they kissed, the crowd rose to its feet, not just clapping, but cheering, crying, believing. In that sound, there was something universal: release. Marcus turned toward the guests, his hand resting gently over the badge inside his jacket. He spoke softly, but everyone heard. "I don't need to record injustice. I correct it. I don't beg for respect. I embody it. Because dignity isn't granted, it's lived. The minister raised his hands. By the power vested in me and affirmed by the man who embodies it, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Music swelled again, this time unbroken, unchallenged. Alicia laughed through tears as petals rained down. Marcus looked toward the fading light, his reflection gleaming in the glass of a guest's camera lens. He didn't smile for the photo, he smiled for the future. As the frame froze, a single caption appeared on every repost, every comment, every heart reacting online. Justice doesn't shout, it stands tall. And somewhere out there another story began, because every time a black man stands in peace and power, the world has to learn to look again.